I think I wrote this in my application actually, was how do you know when it comes to an end, and after fighting and fighting and fighting with it and trying to make it a bit faster or a bit slower, my two projects, in the end, they did naturally kind of come to an end, and it was kind of when I felt like they matched the rhythm that they'd been shot in almost. And it was almost like a rhyme. They rhymed with the way it had been made, and when I found that and it sat in itself, suddenly it just kind of rested a bit peacefully, and it might not have been exactly as I wanted it, but it sort of had to be that way.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. That part of it is that feeling of rest.
When Adorno once said, one thing, he said, we have all our thoughts we have before 30. The rest of our lives, we work on it to express it, to develop it, etc.
Yes.
But thought, in this case, is kind of the intuition. The intuition you have, a singular intuition, and then you keep to it and find a way and a profession in which you can make sense of it.
And there's this feeling, though, when you reach the end, you know, that feeling that you come to the point, and it's actually a kind of a you know that you've hit something that is a final feeling. If you don't have that feeling, it's not, if you haven't reached the end of the book.
My last sentence was, in Hektik und Gelassenheit weiterdenken.
Well, exactly.
I'll get to my in 1 sec, because I was way more interested in the age question, because I used to have a Mary Shelley complex, and after 22 say, well, I've never done anything great and didn't write for years, and so I'm glad you were talking about that and that you read to us, and I thought that was a masterpiece. But you were talking about your process that you spoke out loud and then transcribed it. Do you know offhand, like we probably do, what parts were out loud and how that might be different to recognize than the written?
Well, it was written over several years, and some of it I wrote out by the badminton net with the speaking, and some of it I spoke into a computer and typed, most of it, and then some of it I spoke into a video camera and transcribed after just stripping out the audio file. I couldn't stand it with my face. And so it's sort of, at this point, so mixed that it isn't easy to say, although I think the early part, the part where I say, just stop for a year or two of the poetry, that part, I'm sitting on the stairs in my house with a video camera in front of me. So I transcribed it, but you have to edit,
But you made the right point. Baudrillard was sitting here, Jean Baudrillard, he made the same point and said, we should stop writing philosophy. And then we asked him, it's easy for you to say, you had already 40 books, what about us? But the same feeling, you have to stop, culture has to relax, has to recover from all the words we are getting every year. And so on. No, I don't think that is an answer. For example, even it's an answer, we cannot stop. If we could stop, which I'm sure you and I, we could think of much better jobs than doing writing in that trust. Sleeping would be better. Okay. Yeah, please.
So you kind of touched on it based on the way your last answer. But I'm assuming you're over 21, so you've been around for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And in that time, obviously, technology, mediums change. So you mentioned, using the computer software we speak and types. But maybe starting out, you use pen and paper. Maybe use a typewriter. Do you have a favorite? Do you have like an old standby that you enjoy, kind of?
Well, I've never been able to use the computer transcription software because it doesn't seem to understand me. So what I mean is that I look away and I type and I speak. It's just very primitive. And I love to type. I mean, I have always loved to type. I used to work as a temp typist, and I knew I worked for this woman who said, typing has been the love of my life. And I understood it. I mean, her name was Olive. And she just said, some days I just type numbers all day. And I love it. And at that that point, I was 25 or something and trying to make a living, and I kind of enjoyed it too. It was back in the time of IBM and Selectric typewriters, and it was a tremendous and a Lexus sound. Lexus cardboard went through. Every single key you typed made that sound. So that was at one period, and my father-in-law was a historian, and he typed on an Olivetti manual. And I thought, well, if I'm a real writer, I'll get an Olivetti manual, so I did. And I typed on that for a while, I wrote some essays on that. And then in 1985, I bought a K-Pro, which was a, stamped steel, beautiful little thing that looked like something from the Pentagon. I typed on that, and I used a phone cord that connected the computer to the keyboard so that I could sit across the room and stare at this tiny little thing and see the sentences coming. And I've tried all sorts of different things. Sometimes I used to, when I had lunch hour, I used to write things in the back. I think it's fun to have different ways of saying things and then to mix them all together so that you almost can't remember what the source was, because then you feel that the real self is coming out.
So, how do you manage the line of autobiography and in your people in your life, how they end up sort of inserted into what you're writing, but obviously in some kind of disclosed, way. And
how do you handle autobiographical? The problem of autobiographical fiction is a question I've never really figured out. I want things to be true, but when you're trying to write a novel, you're trying to make it just a little more tellingly true. And so you have to cut off that 2%. Something is 98% true or 87% true, but it's not wholly true. And as soon as you've changed one name or one fact, as soon as you've changed.
But are there other things that you write that you don't want certain people to read, or things that you are, in terms of, because I think we have to get what we create with from somewhere.
That's a box. Does not want to try to read the whole.
I know.
Okay, Vox. Well, Vox is about two people who meet on the phone sex line and they have a conversation.
Very early you thought about it.
That was a long time ago, and it was a work of fiction, but it was based on having interviewed my wife extensively. So it's in a sense trying to do something true. And all of my books, I think the less good of books are the ones that are least true.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of interest and power that comes from having to slalom around what really is there. That's better than when you think to yourself, ooh, wouldn't that be interesting if somebody decided to win the lottery and then did a scam on the quick fill, and then you come up with a plot and then you push your own life into it. That works less well than when you start with your own life and try to work things around it. But you always have to falsify at some point because they're embarrassing things that don't really want to come out yet. You have to save them up. Save some embarrassment for later.
Yeah. Virginia once wrote a master thesis about Plato's the poets lying the truth.
Lying the truth.
That is their greatest advantage over philosophers. We unfortunately have to try to tell the truth, what's impossible. We still try to do it. Whereas the poets, the writers, could lie the truth. They don't care normally if it's true or not. But he says he cares about it. But I just don't think you really care about this kind of truth with a big T. No, you care about the inner truth of the story, how it fits together, and better than life fits, because life does not really fit very well in our perception. Maybe as such, yes, but not for us. Anyway, Barbara, thank you.
I was just thinking about the style of the work and the conversational tone, and I kept thinking of Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brautigan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In the 70s? Brannigan, Brautigan?
Yeah.
I just kept thinking how that so influenced me at that time, and I'd never heard that kind of language as if you were having a conversation with yourself before. And I wondered if you had done any research, since you seem to be a research person, on the history of conversation in literature. Does it go back to the Bible, for instance? I was wondering.
I don't know. I think I have not read Brownigan, although I remember reading the review in the New York Times that very day and seeing the excited discussion of the book and thinking trout fishing in America. But I never have read the book, and I don't know the history of that. What?
You can still read it. I've never read it, so. but the conversational tone is, for me, was exciting for me because it felt like I could be a person, that I could pretend to be a person imparting my knowledge as a poet, although I'm not a poet, and I could throw myself into this character. And that was very exciting. It was so liberating to pretend, but also to know that although I was pretending, there was a lot of suffering and misery and also maybe a little knowledge that I was allowing to trickle into that pretending. So, and that could become conversational. I could say, I'm going to tell you everything I know. And to say you, that was exciting, to say you. And to believe that, that people would listen. Okay, it was a long day. Thank you very much.